We're continuing on Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, Siman Nun Hey, and we are up to Seif Het, discussing who could become part of the minyan and who cannot be counted as minyan. Yesterday, we discussed a person that's sleeping. Can we count him as 10? A person that is perhaps, it happens, or a person that is involved in his own tefillah, he's not at Shemona Esrei, he's not available to answer. That's what we discussed. Now, today we're going to discuss a person that's there and is alert, but he is lacking a certain capacity as a human being. The Shulchan Aruch writes, Cheresh hamdaber ve'eno shomea. A person that is cheresh, that means he is deaf, he could speak, but he can't hear. Is he a person that could be counted as minyan or not? He can't hear your brachot, hence he can't necessarily answer amen. Can he be part of the minyan or can he not be part of the minyan? Says Maran, they are considered completely healthy as far as the minyan is concerned, and you could count them as the minyan. But if you have a person that cannot hear and also cannot speak, now in the previous generations, when you had somebody that was deaf, Rahman al-Itzlan, usually they would also be mute because they would not learn how to speak. Most of the things that you learn is from hearing and being around people. You learn how to speak. If you don't have proper therapy and the advancements of technology, the way we have them today, normally speaking, a person that was born deaf would also end up being mute, and that person, Chazal deemed him to be not a part of the minyan because his brain does not develop in a normal way. He is katan v'shoteh, and therefore would not be part of minyan. But if a person in the time of Chazal would go deaf, chas v'shalom, later on in life, so he could speak, but he's deaf, he can't hear, that person, says the Shulchan Aruch, will be considered still a pikeach. Now, the poskim nowadays discuss that perhaps now that we could develop even a deaf person as a child, when a person is born deaf, chas v'shalom, there still are ways to teach him speech and so on. So perhaps not necessarily this halacha would apply to them, as they are very capable of learning in many different methods and they are intellectually advanced, just like another healthy person is. So says the Mishna Berurah, Herash HaMedaber V'dat HaTaz L'Kabam B'Siman Kuf Kaf Dalet She'en Mesarfin Leminyan Mishe'eno Shomea Aval Gav She'u Medaber. Taz disagrees with this. Shulchan Aruch holds that even if a person is only deaf, even though that he's capable of speaking, still don't count him as minyan because he cannot answer amen on the brachot that the shaliach tzibur says, and therefore he's not considered part of the minyan, says the Taz. Now, the Ben Ish Chai writes, Kaf Chaim writes that when you talk about dvarim shebi kedusha, when you speak about saying kaddish, saying kedusha, saying the chazarat shaliach tzibur, you could include as many as 4 people who are deaf, because you still have rov minyan. You still have 6 people who are answering. So it will be the same thing as we discussed yesterday, that you can have a number of people, as long as you have rov minyan, as long as you have the majority of minyan from healthy adults, the rest could be, says the Ben Ish Chai, says the Kaf Chaim, deaf people. Now, a cheresh that hears through one of these, not the hearing aids, but you have people who hearing aids usually is for a person that has weak hearing sense. But if it's really, really bad, then you have implants in the brain and so on and so forth. You've seen them sometimes with a circle thing attached to their head above the ear. So how about the person that hears through hearing aids? How about the person that cannot hear on their own, but with the hearing aid, they are now capable of hearing. So Chacham Obadiah has a tshuva on this, and he says, even according to this de'ah that's machmir in Shulchan Aruch over here, that the Taz is machmir in Siman Kuf Chaf Dalet, even he would agree that if they hear through a hearing aid, that they could be considered part of the minyan. Because the problem is not hearing. The problem is this person is underdeveloped because of their lack of hearing. Because they cannot hear, they will always remain underdeveloped, or they can't answer. Amen, according to the Taz. So, sorry? Well, he's answering because, again, this is not going to be any less than what the Gemara says that in Alexandria, in Egypt, they had a large minyan, so large that nobody really the people far from the Shaliach Tzibur, they couldn't really hear the Shaliach Tzibur. They had flags, they would move flags, and people knew where he's holding, they would answer Amen. So this person, even if you want to claim that he's not actually hearing the voice of the Shaliach Tzibur because it's an electronically developed voice, not actually considered speech of the speaking individual, still, he knows where they're holding it. As part of the tefillah, he's answering Amen on the right brachot, he's answering Amen Yeshem Rabbah on the right place, and therefore he's part and parcel of the Sibur. Now, that by itself, whether or not hearing aid is considered, it could be Yotzeh, for instance, Megillah, with hearing aid. Let's imagine somebody that can't hear well, a regular person that has a hearing aid, and they're reading Megillat Esther. Does he have to take them off and go right next to the Shaliach Tzibur to make sure he's hearing the words without the hearing aid? Or can he just listen with the hearing aids and stay far wherever he sits in the shul? What are the stadim? What's the machloket? When you have a microphone, it's the same halacha, by the way. You have a microphone. Can you read Megillat Esther in microphone? Can you say Birkat Chatanim, which you need minyan for it? Can you say it in a microphone when people far from it, they're not hearing it from the actual person saying the brachot? The difference is when I speak in the microphone, you hear my voice. It sounds exactly like my voice, but it's not really my voice. It is an electronically simulated voice, which is created electronically, has nothing to do with me. It just sounds like how I sound like. It's an advanced technology that simulates my voice electronically. Is that a voice of a human being? Absolutely not. It's a machine, right? Imagine if you listen to a tape recorder, right? You record a person reading Megillat Esther, and on Purim you want to play it and say, well, I listened to Megillah. Does that work? Absolutely not. So the voice that you hear out of the microphone is exactly the same thing as the tape recorder, right? Tape recorders are dinosaurs now. You have to say now, MP, whatever, they're up to what, 4 now, 5, right? The MP3, the original MP3, so that's the recorded voice, and it's not a voice of a human being speaking. Now, Moshe Feinstein has several different shuvot, and it goes back and forth. Surprisingly, Chazon Ish, who's Machmir, usually known as a very stringent one, here he actually has a logic to be more mekel. He says, well, so long as is live broadcast, so to speak, that you speaking at the same time as I'm hearing you, even if I'm far from you, and the voice I'm hearing primarily is the voice from the microphone, from the loudspeaker, or from the phone, or from my hearing aid, which is taking your voice and amplifying it, and I'm hearing an electronic loud voice that sounds like your voice. All of that is the same technology, basically. Says the Chazon Ish, I am causing this. by speaking in the mic, I am causing this voice to work right now. So that's considered the extension of my voice, even though that it is an electronically simulated voice that you hear. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein in one tshuva also seems to have safek about this same thing. Again, Chacham Obadiah is generally speaking machmir, says you should not read Megillat Esther in a microphone and so on. But again, by hearing aids, more people are sympathetic to it because that's the way this individual hears. But nevertheless, there are those who say, if you could hear by taking off your hearing aids and stand next to the Shaliach Tzibur, do that chatchila. This way you get out of all the questions. So it says, the Mishna Berurah, many people agree with the Shulchan Aruch, not like the Taz, and they hold that a person that is deaf and could speak but can't hear still could be considered as part of the minyan. They disagree with the Taz, and Chacham Yosef also passes like this. And you see from the Kaf HaChaim that you could include a deaf person in Chazarat Shaliach Tzibur only if you don't have any other option. So basically, Kaf HaChaim makes a pshara between the Taz and the Shulchan Aruch. Says, well, Shulchan Aruch says he could do it, so push comes to shove, he could do it. But that's only if you have no other option. If you have your back against the wall, says the Kaf HaChaim, do it. But otherwise, don't do it. Right? Now, the Ben Ish Chai is one of the places the Ben Ish Chai deviates from the Psak of Shulchan Aruch and is machmir like the Taz. The Ben Ish Chai writes, you cannot use a deaf person, even one deaf person, as the 10th man for Chazarat Shaliach Tzibur, because he's machmir like the Taz, and he cannot answer Amen, and therefore you cannot get them as the 10th person in the minyan. So that's the Ben Ish Chai. Ve'imhu mechaven habrachot, says the Chafetz Chaim, if he is careful to answer Amen, and he's keeping track of where the Shaliach Tzibur is holding, and he's very alert, he sees, oh, they're answering Magen Avraham, Amen, right? Akel HaKadosh, Amen. He's really with it, and he gets it. Says the Mishna Berurah, Dumia the Hanafat Sudarim Bebet HaKnesset Shar Alexandria. Like the Gemara that we just mentioned in Masechet Sukkah, I believe is in Daf Nun Aleph Amud Bet. The Gemara there says in Alexandria, in Mitzrayim, they would wave the flags for people who didn't hear to answer Amen. Says the Chafetz Chaim rather, he understands when the end of the bracha happens and people answer Amen, and he answers with them. Says the Chafetz Chaim, this person, according to everybody, is going to be included in the bracha. In other words, it's not a deaf person that's clueless, comes to the shul, and he's like clueless of what's happening in the shul. This guy is alert. He's looking at his lip reading the people, knowing exactly where they're holding, knowing exactly what the Shaliach Tzibur is saying, even though that he can't hear it, but he's alert and aware of what's happening, and he's participating actively in the minyan, answering Amen, Amen, Yeshem Rabbah, Kedusha, and so on. Says the Chafetz Chaim, according to everyone he could include him in the minyan. That's no less than the Gemara in Sukkah Nun Aleph by Alexandria, the minyan, the large Bet Knesset in Egypt that the Gemara talks about. Says the Gemara, says the Mishna Berurah rather. Now, this actually is the last piece of Mishna Berurah. So let's start the Seif Tet. Le'olam hu katan, a person always would remain in the status of a katan, of a minor, ad sheyavi shtes arot, achar sheyeh ben 13 v'yom. Now, this is a question that everyone has, of course, right? When does a person become an adult? Now, we, technically speaking, most people, I believe it's fair to say, most people think, well, the guy is about bar mitzvah, he's an adult. No, not true. That's only one of the criteria for becoming a halachic adult. The definition of a halachic adult is a person that has grown hair in the area of their makom erva. The maturity brings with it a certain physical development in the body, which manifests usually in this area. And a person that has that physical sign and has reached the mark of 13 years and a day, basically 13 full years of age, that is considered a adult. Now, the reason that we think, oh, it's bar mitzvah, is not just we made it up. The Gemara talks about it, it calls chazakah de Rava. Rava says, when a boy is 13, full 13 years old, we assume that he has shte sarot as well. We assume that he has the shne sarot. You don't have to go check. Now, do we rely on chazakah de Rava or do we not rely on chazakah de Rava? It becomes the big question. Now, the Gemara says in Hulin, when you have safek in the deoraita, in Daf Zayin, I think. When you have a safek in the deoraita, when you have a doubt on a biblical matter, what do? Safek deoraita, humrah. When you have safek in the Rabbanan, what do you say? Safek Rabbanan lekula. So the question is, if you're talking about a deoraita thing, he just became bar mitzvah tonight. It's Friday night. It's tonight, and he's becoming a bar mitzvah tonight. Mamash, it became Seta Kochavim, he's not bar mitzvah. Can he say kiddush for everyone on Friday night? Well, kiddush Friday night is the oraita, right? Tomorrow morning is going to be kiddush darabanan, pashtu. But Friday night is the oraita. So can he say the oraita? Or can he read Parashat Zachor versus reading the Parashat of his bar mitzvah? Imagine if his bar mitzvah is a regular week. Can he read and be motzi, right? The tzibur, he's the agent of the tzibur, he's reading for everyone. Can he be the shaliach tzibur reading the thing? Well, maybe Torah is not the best example because it gets complicated that the Katan could read the Torah. The whole Torah, at the very least, is a question, right? Versus Pashat Zachor, for instance. That you're reading a Doraita, can he be the Baal Koreh of a Doraita? So let's read the Shulchan Aruch and see what the halacha is. The Olam Katan, a person is always considered a Katan until he has this two. That shevish tesarot, that he has grown the tesarot b'makom erva, and also he has become ben shalosh esrei v'yom echad, and he's also 13 years and 1 day. Ushnat ha'ivur bat shalosh esrei chodesh, and in a ibur year, he has to be completing the 13 months. So there's a lot that's in this Seif in Shulchan Aruch. Let's study this together. Mishna Berurah says, Shte Sa'arot, u'mekoman b'shi'ur gadlutan mevu'ar be'Eben Ezer, Siman Kuf Nun Hey. The place of these two hair and, what size they have to be and so on and so forth, all is discussed in Eben Ezer, Siman Kuf Nun Hey. So if you Zayin and Yud Chet, so we're not going to discuss it right now. Perhaps we, in the shiur over here, will come back to this at the end of this Seif Bli Neder, if time allows. Chazal accepted this. Halacha Moshe Misinai. This is a halacha Moshe Misinai that the male individual is not considered an adult. Shelo yikareh hazachar ish is not called a man at sheishlemu lo shalosh esrei shana until he has completed his 13 years of age. And also he has the shte sarot. This when the Gemara says in Sukkah Daf Daled, in Eruvin Daf Vav, shiurin chasitzin umechitzin halacha Moshe Misinai, that the measurements are halacha Moshe Misinai. This is also a shiur. This is considered a measurement of adulthood, and it's halacha Moshe Misinai. We hold like Rava. Here is where it starts, right? So it says, we do hold like Rava that once he gets to 13 years of age, it's chazakah, we call it chazakah de Rava. It's chazakah, Rava says, that he also has the shte sa'arot. So you could assume, based on chazakah, that he has the shte sa'arot without checking. No, the main thing is both. If you have sa'arot before the age, right? So says the Gemara, says the Mishna Berurah, therefore, even if you see that they don't have shte sa'arot, we assume we are concerned maybe he had it and they fell and he actually is halakhically an adult. Sometimes they do fall the Zaharot. Sometimes sometimes because he's too fast, sometimes because he's too thin. Even though that we paskin like Rava, the chazakah de Rava, but we don't rely on chazakah de Rava completely. What does that mean? We don't rely on chazakah de Rava. We deal with it as safek. Now we go back full circle to the Gemara that I mentioned in Chulin, that if you have safek, the oraita would be the humrah. The Rabbanan would be the kula. Therefore, in anything that's the oraita, we always go the humrah. We assume that until you check him and he has the sarot, he's considered a minor. And you can't have him say Kiddush on Friday night because it's the oraita. You can't have him read Parshat Zachor because it's the oraita. And on the Rabbanan will be Mekel. In Magen Avraham, later on, that he discusses whether or not in this applies in the halacha. Over there, Masarech Iyun Ketzat. Seif Katan Lamed Aleph, Mashkatav B'Shem Apri Migadim. Okay, so he discusses it more in different places. Ben Shalosh Esrei Shana ve'aviv me'eman al zeh ve'lo ish acher. How do you know that the person is Shalosh Esrei Shana? Right, nowadays you have birth certificates and you have a phone converter of dates, and in a few minutes you could prove it, right? Hopefully. But back in the day, they didn't have birth certificates. So who's Ne'eman to say, oh, I remember this boy was born in Parashat Vayeshev, Tafshin Pei Gimel. Who knows, right? Says the Mohel would not be Ne'eman, right? You think a good Mohel that does so many remembers? No, the only person that's Ne'eman is the father, because the father is his business to remember. He makes sure he remembers, and therefore he is a Ne'eman, right? Well, if he heard from the father, yes. Yeah. Nobody else says anyone that he heard directly from the father is Ne'eman to say, well, father told me that this is the bar mitzvah date. If they directly heard from the father, then they are Ne'eman. Now, how about the kid himself? Is he Ne'eman to say, I am becoming bar mitzvah tonight? Right? So, Kaf HaChaim writes, if the kid is mature, meyushav b'da'at, he is Yireh Shamayim, then you can rely on him as well to make sure that he has figured it out, even though that he doesn't remember probably when he was born. They say Rambam remembered that he was in a little arisa and so on and so forth. They say about different people, Rav Tzadok HaKohen Milublin and so on. But probably a person doesn't remember when the date they were born. That's for sure. So how does he know? He has researched. He has found out from his father, from his mother, from whatever it is, to make sure that he's correct. So therefore, if he is Yireh Shamayim and he's mature, we could rely on it. And Chacham Ovadia says that l'chatchila he cannot rely on the kid himself. He can't, because how does he know? Right? L'chatchila he can't do it, but if there's no other person that could be me'id on him, for instance, imagine the father was not frum, or the father died early on, and he is the one that actually has figured it out, then says Chacham Ovadia, fine, then you could rely on him. But again, if you could avoid it, Chacham Ovadia would say avoid it. If you could be a different Shaliach Tzibur for Parshat Zachor, not a different Shaliach Tzibur. If you have someone else say Kiddush on Friday night until the Safek is finished from your heart, right? At Shesel Safek V'Libo, then have somebody else do it meanwhile until you no longer have a Safek. So it says, the Mishna Berurah, Kenita Bekiddushin Daf Samach Dalet Amud Aleph. Mishna Berurah brings that this is a Gemara in Samach Dalet Amud Aleph in Masechet Kiddushin in Tosafot Dibur HaMatchil Ne'eman. Okay. Imet Aviv ve'eno yodea matay nasa ben 3 shana. If the father Chas V'Shalom died and we don't know when he's becoming a bar mitzvah, לכאורה דין ההוא דמכיוון שהביש שתי שערות, חייב לזהר במצוות התורה, כדין שער גדול. That from the moment that he has שתי שערות in מקום ערווה, we ought to think that he is already chayav deoraita, and for himself he has to be machmir on everything like an adult. So this is unfortunately something that became very relevant after the Holocaust. You had all these kids that the parents died, and there was no way for them to know. You know, they had no birth certificate, they had no passports, so everything was lost, everything was destroyed. So you had this she'elot for many individuals. They didn't know when their bar mitzvah is. They didn't necessarily remember when their bar mitzvah is. And the halacha would be, says the Mishna Berurah, so long as soon as they develop shtesarot, they should be mahmir on everything. You already assume that they are 13. They may not be 13 yet, but they have the signs. So therefore, you would be mahmir for that. Now, the Shcharuch, if you paid attention, says that you do 13 years and 1 day. Why 13 years and 1 day? Says the Mishna Berurah, v'yom echad. Why yom echad? Lav davka yom. Doesn't mean 1 full day. Doesn't mean that. As soon as the first day of the 14th year of his age starts, which starts at night, even 1 hour, even 1 moment, Sagi, it's sufficient. So let's give an example. Even if he was born at the end of the day of Rosh Hashanah, right? This year, Rosh Hashanah, 5 minutes before Shki'ah, he was born. But it's Vadayom, you still see the sun. So he was born on Rosh Hashanah, and that day counts. When does he become Bar Mitzvah? He becomes Bar Mitzvah the night of Rosh Hashanah, Na'asa ben 13 shana, b'tchilat le Rosh Hashanah shel shenat 14. Right? He could say the Kiddush of the night of Rosh Hashanah for you, given that, you know, if you say the Kiddush of Yom Tov is Doraita, which is a massive machloket by itself, then you need to know if he has Shnesarot. But given that he has Shnesarot, he could be the one saying the Kiddush, because now, even though that is not 24 hours that he has become a Bar Mitzvah, hasn't become full hour-wise, has not become 13 times 364, 5, or 54, whatever it is, days full for 24 hours, is missing 24 hours almost, like 23 and a half hours. But nevertheless, it's halachically considered gadol because he finished his 13 years and he entered the 14th year by a moment into Seta Kochavim after the nightfall of the Leil Rosh Hashanah. And if when he was born was Ben Hashmashot after Shkiah, then Dainina le Safek, we consider this as a Safek. Then we deal with it as a Safek, whether he was born yesterday or today, and on every Deoraita we will be Mahmir the way it will come out. And Bezat Hashem, we will continue this in the days to come.